Today, you'll be learning how to soothe your anxious mind and stop ruminating. My guest is Dr. John Delony, host of The Dr. John Delony Show and author of a new book, Building a Non-Anxious Life. Dr. John, so good to see you again.
I'm grateful for your hospitality. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's good to talk with you again today. And this subject in particular, like I was thrilled to learn about your new book coming out because this is really hard when we get stuck in these like anxious thoughts. So I know that you have some life experience with this yourself, as we all do. Is it fair to say that that's where the origin story of this book came from, or was there a different path towards?
I think it was a combination
Yeah.
of both. People kept asking what was my journey out of
Mm-hmm.
a really anxious life, but more importantly, I travel all over the country meeting with groups and folks behind closed doors, and it's a consistent drumbeat
Yeah.
of people trying to figure out how to be well in a really chaotic time in human
Mm.
history, and it's I think we're going about it sideways, and the things that we are doing that otherwise would normally work are just we're not being honest about how ineffective they are, and
Mm.
there's not really another roadmap. And so that was my attempt to with this book here is to lay out a framework for here's how to build a life where you're not anxious all the time and we're not depressed all
Yeah.
the time, and we can go down rabbit holes there, but so even saying that out loud is a little bit controversial these days. So that's the genesis of the book.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, and I get that because it has felt more fraught just in the world lately. And, even for people who have had fairly well developed skills and strategies for being okay, when things get too much, those aren't enough anymore. And so we need to double down or learn new things, new
Right.
strategies, a new map, as you say. So we know that rumination can be a component of anxiety. That's part of what makes us feel elevated, kind of attached to thoughts or ideas that don't feel great. Can you take us in a little bit to your understanding of rumination and how it contributes to the experience of anxiety or depression for that matter?
I'm working on a hypothesis. I'm glad I get to talk to somebody who's way smarter than I am about this. In grad school, they taught us that anxiety, that like OCD, like these loops are a derivative of anxiety. And then I think even in the latest DSM, they branched out on their own. But that anxiety and depression sit separate from each other. And then downstream is hoarding, and downstream is OCD and some of these repetitive behaviors.
Hmm.
I was recently introduced to some brain maps where they can track the loops that OCD travels in your brain, and I started to wonder, what if we have it backwards? What if the root of so much of our mental health is just simply our mind catching itself in a loop, and it's
Hmm.
passing it these thoughts back to the response, back to the thoughts, back to the response, because so much of our world has left the human body and we do so much of our lives in our brain. We
Yeah.
text, we don't talk, we send photos, we don't show up in person. We sit down and type emails. We don't go across the hall and have
Mm.
conversations. We've completely removed the physical life out of our existence, and we've shoved it up in our head, and we do all of our work in our head, which is kind of cool. I'm glad I'm not shoveling concrete all day, but I think there's a physiological toll. And so at the end of the day, rumination is simply your mind telling
Mhm.
itself stories in some sort of anticipatory way to try to circumvent bad things that may happen. Or as the great Brene Brown says, it's dress rehearsing tragedy. It's practicing a conversation. It's practicing what are
Yeah.
you going to do when your husband dies in a car wreck because he's late coming home from work, or and you find out that she's been cheating on you. It's just this rehearsal, this rehearsal, this rehearsal. And
Right.
it was news to me that our body has one fight or flight response, whether there's a bear standing in front of us or whether we are consciously conjuring the bear in our minds, it's still going to
Right.
kick off the same system. And so
Mhm.
we can literally bury ourselves just sitting in the shower, having an imaginary conversation with our boss. We can literally choose to die younger by having an imaginary conversation with the guy in front of us to just cut us off on the way to work, right?
Absolutely.
And because our body's like, all right, it's time to fight, even though there's not a real threat there. And so That's my understanding of rumination, and
Yeah.
it simply has begun to bury people, myself included.
Yeah. Oh, right. Me too. I think everybody can relate to having been just stuck in those loops. And I'm so glad you are talking about the relationship just between our thoughts and the way we feel, because that blew my mind too. I didn't understand that at one point in my life, that the things we think about have the same impact on our physiology as things that are happening right in front of us. And the things we're visualizing or imagining can impact us in the same way.
When our brain recognizes it, you've heard the term
Mhm.
neuroception, right? So it's your brain is scanning 24/7, 365
Mm.
your environment. It will recognize threats or things that it thinks are threats before I even have the thought. And then it is firing the systems to go to battle or to run away or to pull back or
Mhm.
to to freeze. And then I'm going to conjure up a story as to why I feel that way. And
Yeah.
that's why I look around and go, I'm starting to feel anxious. It's her fault, right? Or
You.
I'm flipping the news channels and
Yeah.
suddenly I feel anxious, and it must be that political party's fault, right? So I'm
Right.
instantly creating a story to backfill this threat response that my body's kicked off. So it's just a mess. It's an absolute mess.
Yeah, it goes the other way too, that we have these physiological reactions and then our brain hopefully comes along and creates a narrative, like a
Right.
reason why that may or may not be true. Yeah.
It's almost never true, but it's fun to believe.
Wow. Well, and I love too the very interesting point that you brought up when we were first talking around the impact of living in a world, a society, a culture that is increasingly digital, meaning that it's all in our heads compared to being physical creatures in the physical world, but also like not being aware of how disconnected and cut off from the physical world we are in some ways, because it's normal.
It's
It's
normal.
becoming,
I remember
yeah.
about 10 years ago, he's a close friend of mine. He's a college president, and he was my
Hmm.
boss at the time. And I was thinking some really awful things about him. Like, I thought his leadership was terrible. I thought the way he was treating people was awful. And all of a sudden, a message pops up on my phone, and it's him. And we go back and forth, totally benign conversation about something completely.
Hmm.
We're back and
Hmm.
forth, texting back and forth, texting back and forth. And later on that night, I remember having a panic. Like, did I say that to him? Like, what did I say versus what did I think versus what did I
Yeah.
communicate? Because used to, and I sound like a 500-year-old man who walked uphill both ways in the snow to school. I know when I say that. But used to, I had my thoughts and those were private. And then I
Yeah.
spoke things out. Now
Hmm.
I text them out. So I'm still, everything is in my head. And I think we're getting jumbled as to what we thought and what we texted and what we said and what we DM'd and to who and to how. And it's
Right.
just becoming a big mess. Even up to 25 years ago and all before human history, nobody could hear the conversation you and I are having unless they were in our room. And now they put in headphones, and I find this, I'm traveling the country. People will come up and they will hug me and they'll say, "How's Josephine, my daughter?" And my first thought is, I don't know you. You better not say my daughter's name. Like, who are you?
Oh,
But they've been
yeah.
listening to hours of me having conversations, deep, intimate conversations,
Right.
and their bodies are like, we know that guy and he's safe.
Hmm.
And so it's just a new frontier we're on. And then we're trying to not be anxious, right? We're trying to not be depressed, and our bodies are just going haywire.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, like a certain level of paranoia almost comes with like being more
Always.
exposed in a lot of
Right.
ways.
It's a new frontier. It's a new frontier. So the whole idea for me is, what if we stop trying to be not anxious? What if that wasn't the
Mm.
goal, to try to
Mhm.
stop anxiety or to
Mm.
stop depression? What if instead we focused all of our, because if we look at it and we're really honest, and you and I are both mental health folks, that's our world, that's our tribe. More people are in counseling under the tutelage of a mental health professional than ever before in human history. People who went to
Mhm.
grad school, got tons of hours of training and practice.
Yeah.
More people are taking psychotropic medications than ever before in human history. And
Mhm.
the depression anxiety trend line is continuing to be almost vertical. So we
Mm.
have to be honest and say, okay, maybe something else is in the air because everybody's still getting sick.
Yeah.
And if I back out, what if I quit trying to be not anxious and I let the anxiety my body's just natural alarm system let me know where I'm not safe or where I'm lonely or where my body's
Yeah.
out of control. And what if I created a world where my alarms weren't going off all the time, trying to get my
Right.
attention to tell me I'm not safe? And that's a much more challenging conversation, but it feels over the long term much more simple and secure way of going about it.
You're saying to respect your emotional guidance system as opposed to try
Trying to
to
pull the
make your
batteries out and shut it down. Yes. Yeah.
yeah, and take influence from these feelings and respond to them, saying maybe my values, this is telling me something important about my values or telling me something about this relationship that I should listen to rather than trying to, as you say, take the batteries out or anesthetize myself.
I used to tell my college students, I'll never forget doing we used to do a survey with especially with the law students, older professional
Hmm.
students. And I'll never forget doing a survey. I would do it at the beginning of every year, and then I'd go read the data back to them. And it never failed that a high percentage of them, in the high 80s or 90%, would answer the question, I need a few drinks to feel sexy, to feel engaged in
Mm-hmm.
intimacy. And what I would always tell them is, if you have to override your body's innate systems that say, I don't want to do something, listen to your body. Don't numb those alarms. Don't try to cover them up with a pile of pillows and some dirt so that
Right.
you can pretend they're not going off, because they are, right? You're
Yeah.
violating your own core self if you have to drink to accomplish something for somebody else. So yeah, listen to these alarm systems and ask yourself what they're trying to tell you. Sometimes they're just telling you nonsense, but sometimes they're trying to save your life.
Trying to save your life.
Yeah.
Say more about that idea.
We've seen the diseases of despair literature, right?
Yeah.
Particularly people of means are dying of addiction and organ disease failures and suicide. You ignore the alarms long enough,
Mm-hmm.
it goes back to like just using a smoke alarm in your kitchen, right? And we may have talked about this last time, but anxiety is just a smoke alarm in your kitchen trying to let you know, hey, something's on fire. And if I spend all of my time trying to shut the alarm off, I can finally turn it off. I could knock
Yeah.
it down with a broom, or I could take the batteries out, but my house is going to burn down around me. I haven't solved the problem. I've just stopped the
Mm-hmm.
alarm system. And
Yeah.
so there's something about going out in the front yard while the alarm is going and trying to figure out what's on fire. And
Mm-hmm.
what's on fire in our current culture is we're so lonely. We spend so much time in our heads ruminating
Yeah.
and spinning, and we're cranking up our defense system and shutting it down, and cranking it up and it shuts down. And we have all these challenges that we've created to try to stop these alarms instead of doing the hard work of
Mm-hmm.
dealing with our lives.
So the real work here, how to stop ruminating, is what you're saying is what would happen if you listened to that? What is that alarm system trying to tell you over and over again? What maybe do you need to pay attention to? And that could be the path forward here, that you'll stop ruminating once you start listening to yourself.
Well, and with rumination, I think it's twofold. There's the acute,
Mm,
there's like, I need to stop this right now. And
yeah.
it's when I recognized there's no benefit to rumination. It's not helpful. And so
Right.
there'll be times I'm walking through the living room and I'll just yell out, nope. And my wife will just roll her eyes because she knows I'm stopping an imaginary conversation I'm having with my boss. I'm not having this conversation. And I
Yeah.
know that when I'm tired and when I've eaten a bunch of garbage and I haven't exercised in a while and my marriage is kind of on thin ice, that's when my brain starts spinning up stories. And so
Hmm.
I think it's a both and. I think there's a stopping it in the acute phase. I'm not going to feed it. And I'm going to create a world where it's less necessary.
Yeah. Well, you know what I think what we're talking about here. I'm sure you've had this conversation with clients and people as well, but like there's a difference between anxiety and fear. And that's what I hear you saying, that like that unhelpful piece, that anxiety, that rumination, but that is different than fear. We need to listen to fear. Like, what is your emotional guidance system telling you about? And that I wonder if that could be part of where you go in your book, is how to tell the difference between what are these emotional signals that are just noise, just me,
Mm-hmm.
machinations, stuff that isn't helpful, versus what What are my feelings telling me that I need to listen to? Because that, I think, can be difficult and confusing sometimes in itself.
I think clarifying, that's a great call out. There is actually a section on fear versus fear and stress and anxiety. What's the difference? But
Yeah.
I think the tiger that just popped in the front of your cave, that's fear. You should be scared of that. There's a tiger in front. Laying in bed at night and thinking, okay, what happens if there's a tiger? What if a tiger comes? Is a tiger going to come? A tiger came last time. I heard there's one. That's rumination. It does no good. It doesn't help.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we have to understand, the tigers are going to show up in our life. They just are. Parents are going to pass away. Loved ones are going to cheat. Kids are going to get sick. That's life.
Yeah.
And so spending a life trying to either pretend tigers don't come or to try to kill all the tigers so they don't exist, that's a waste of time. They will show up out of nowhere. If I do the hard work and I'm laying in bed and I say, okay, I've got a trap set at the front of the place. I've got a back door that's got a great exit to it. All of us are trained on the Tiger protocol. I've done the best I can with what I have. I'm going to go to sleep. And so in my world, like just doing the research for this book, I didn't understand how close the relationship to clutter in your house is to anxiety. And your body will start to get your attention. I didn't know that. I didn't understand there's a great Japanese proverb. Every object in your home is having a conversation with you. You walk into your closet and your shirts are like, why aren't you wearing me? Oh, you gotten too fat? You can't wear me anymore? Or are you getting too skinny now? Or what about your mother? Or I walk down in my basement and it's like, wow, you're just going to leave us trash like this. Great example for your kids. And there's books on my shelf that are like, oh, you're not going to are you going to stay stupid forever? You're just going to be dumb? Is that good for you? And my guitars on the wall are like, oh, are you too cool to play music now? I guess you're too old and grown up and boring. And so all of our junk is always talking to us. All the dishes in the sink, the unmade bed, things are always talking. So there's a direct link to clutter, and there's a direct link to how much money you owe. Your frontal lobe can really know you got a great deal. You got 5 years, no interest. It's a great deal. Your amygdala knows if one thing happens at work, we lose our house. We lose our food. We lose our car. And it's not going to let you sleep until it's safe. It would be failing at its job if it let you have a good night's sleep, knowing that just one wrong thing you say at work and you're homeless. And so if you look at your calendars, at all these things that we just take for granted in this wild world we've created for ourselves, and our brains are just trying to be like, hey, not safe, not safe, not safe, not safe. And it's just, the alarms are getting so loud. And then it comes out in back pain and knee pain and ruminations and all kind of weird things. And I think it's just stepping back and saying, okay, where am I disconnected and where am I not safe? And where am I not in control of my own life? I mean, your smoke alarm doesn't go off if there's not a fire, right? Unless it's defective. And that's an occasional thing. And then you deal with that.
This is interesting, and it's reminding me of something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, is the power of like different parts of our brains. You know, we have the thinking part of our brain that we're very fond of and pleased with. We are making conscious decisions that are entirely in our control, and we have all these reasons why we do what we do. But there's this also giant and very powerful part of our brain that is incredibly aware. It is non-conscious, and it is just picking up all of the sensory information from every part. And it's creating tension. It's creating feelings of danger. It doesn't let you forget that maybe you are unsafe if there's too much debt in your life. That's what was coming up for me as you were talking about that relationship with clutter, that there are all these other operating systems that are contributing to feeling safe or not in the world that may not always be conscious, but that we need to pay attention.
A lot of them aren't. That's right. Yeah. It reminds me of that he got in a lot of trouble. Jon Stewart had a rant about COVID on Stephen Colbert's show. But what he said was, we should be really thankful that we have science solving a lot of these problems that were caused by science. And I started laughing, thinking that's very similar to our thinking, right? Like, I'm always having to think my way out of problems that I created just by thinking about things too much, right? And at some point, let's change the way we're living our lives, and I'm confident these alarm systems will begin to settle out on their own.
Well, and if this is okay, as we've been talking, I have been
Oh
like
yeah,
accumulating curiosity questions just about
bring
very
them on.
interesting things that
Let's
you've
do it.
said. So we're going totally off the map. Like I had my list of things to talk to Dr. John about. Like, no, let's just go in a totally different direction. So you said a few minutes ago, your observation that more people are in counseling than ever before. More people are on antidepressants than ever before. And I don't know how old your kids are, but I just was interested to see a report that came out recently, particularly about teenage and preteen girls and just the mental health. I mean, there's no other word for it than crisis with self harm. And it's just so awful. So I'm curious to know, what do you make of that? So much more treatment, so much more accessibility, lowered stigma around getting help. But it's like the need has become greater.
Yeah.
What do you think? What is that?
I'll make a quick comment on one of the things you mentioned, and then
Oh,
I'll kind of give some insight there. I The great Terrence Real,
yeah.
he's a master therapist. He pulled the blanket back for me on male depression in a way,
Yeah.
years ago. I think that if we were to look at a more holistic picture of our kids, I think our boys are struggling too. It just looks
Yeah.
different. I think girls are more maybe classic. They fall more classically into some of
Mm-hmm.
the diagnostic categories or some of the
Mm-hmm.
behaviors. But I think our boys are melting too. It just sometimes
Yeah.
comes out in violence or it comes out in aggression. But I think depression, anxiety, I think all these kids are just melting. I think they're just melting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think if I back out of the whole system, it feels like the house is flooding and we're keep yelling, we need more boats, we need more boats, we need more
Right.
boats.
Right.
And nobody's saying, hey, why don't we just turn the water off? Like, let's start there. Let's find the
Yeah.
leak in the house. And if I'm honest with myself, I think we've created lives that our bodies were not designed to live in. They just aren't designed to have this much stimulation, this much communication from this many people all the time. And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't designed to work as long as we are forcing the human body to work. And it
Right.
wasn't designed to worry about everything all by itself, completely and totally alone. Was it one out of two? It wasn't designed for some of these pressures we're putting on it. It wasn't designed to do life without some sort of cosmic reality. We've just
Mm-hmm.
completely pulled the thread on any and all religious threads and just said it's all stupid and dumb. And we've left a generation of human completely untethered to some
Mm-hmm.
story bigger than themselves. And so if I look back, we've just created a world that our bodies can't exist in. And then we're trying to still have great marriages and be good parents and have great sex into your 90s or whatever we're expecting these days. So it's just madness. And so I think the path forward is somebody's got to just turn the music off and turn the lights on to this dance and be like, what are we
Mm-hmm.
doing? And if you look back historically, cultures usually have to have a great crisis to stop the madness. My hope is we're all getting it and everyone's like, okay, this isn't working. And we're seeing our young people, they're trying, right? They're trying things like quiet quitting and they're trying things like, I'm just not going to do anything. Like they're trying something different. It may not be the most intelligent move, but they're
Mm-hmm.
trying something. I think we've got to come up with a new way of saying, this is what is success. This is what relationship health looks like. This is what I actually want and need in my life. And let's go backfill that. And I don't need to put a bunch of money on a depreciating asset that sits in my
Mm-hmm.
driveway for 23 out of 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
Like all these things that we've just taken for granted. I don't need a 7,500 square foot house. Um, what if we figured out how to have a well and whole life and then begin to wrap our heads around that? And
Yeah.
I think that's a much more challenging proposition. It's simple, but it's hard. But man, it's freeing when you wake up and you
Mm-hmm.
don't have any chains on you.
Yeah. No, that's a very powerful idea. And really you're going into like what is the true source of the discomfort and learning how to feel comfortable in paying attention to that, taking influence
Intentionality.
of
Yeah.
it. And like even going back to what you were saying about Terry Grohl, who I have also had the great pleasure of interviewing on this show. And his message is one really of this courageous conflict in like almost fighting for intimacy that
Yeah.
is meaningful, that is powerful, and it's difficult to do. And what you're saying is that in the absence of these things that we need, there are almost fairly predictable feelings of distress, despair, anxiety, depression, loneliness, but that instead of taking action on those and asking the harder question around, so what do I really need to do to fix this? It is a pursuit of how do I stay in this unhealthy environment and try to figure out a way to be okay.
I think it's on your second point. I think we had all of our choices taken from us and we didn't even realize it. Like
Oh,
Netflix has, we don't even have to pick up our hands and change, like get the next show. It just tells you, I know you better than you do. You're going to want to watch
mm-hmm.
this next series, and it just starts it automatically. I don't have to do anything. I can ask Siri to send pizza and she will call and order it for me. And it just shows up at my house. And so I don't even think that we are trying to stay in these bubbles. I think we are
Right.
just saying, going to the next news source that's going to tell us, hey, you know why you're feeling terrible? It's because of the Republicans. It's because of the Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
You know why you
Yeah.
feel awful? Some other country's about to take over everything you've ever worked. And so our bodies are anxious and fried and cooked, and we're just being
Mm-hmm.
handed scripts as to why we're
Yeah.
frustrated. It's your spouse. He doesn't care about you. She doesn't love you. Look how much weight he's gained. And we just keep handing scripts and handing scripts, and we just digest them without even thinking, just digest them, digest them.
Yeah.
And our bodies at some point go, I'm out. I'm out. I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you see somebody at work that laughs at your jokes, and you tell another joke and it feels so good to have somebody finally make you feel a little bit more alive.
Yeah.
Or somebody at work says, hey, we're about to go in and invest in this thing, and you know it's stupid, but then that guy always makes it work and he starts to cut corners, but you're going to do it anyway. Right? That's when you find yourself doing things that you would never do.
Mm.
Um, because you're trying to come up with some real experience that backs up these narratives that are just being handed to you, handed to you, handed
Mm-hmm.
to you. And it just
Yeah.
creates blech. And so really, yeah,
Right.
well, you mentioned it, was just about taking your life back. It's just saying, I want to live a life of peace. I want to find a
Mm-hmm.
life where my brain and body aren't screaming at me 24/7, trying to get my
Mm-hmm.
attention all the time.
Yeah.
I want to be able to look at my wife and say, hey, we got separated. Like, we are too far apart here. What happened?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to tell you, I think I said some things that I didn't mean. They came out wrong, and I hurt you, and I'm sorry. That's on
Yeah.
me. How can I love you better? Man, if you're not buried by debt and expectation and fear, and you're scared, and you've got newscasters telling you who to hate, if you don't have that, then you have
Right.
space for emotional intimacy and dealing with shame and dealing with that frustration. That's a totally different proposition. So it's just
Mm.
a different way of living.
Right. Right.
And Doc, we know these people. It's the people that we sit with and we talk to them, and they leave, and you're like, they leave a tracer trail behind them. You just want to follow them. You just want to keep talking to them. You just want to stay in their presence because they just are peace, right? They just all have a
Mm.
different way of moving through the world. And I just want people to know that's not a mystic. It's just being intentional and making some different choices.
It's like almost seeing, being able to see all these different attachments or even like weights on you, and
Yeah.
then taking active steps towards your own freedom, taking the weights off, cutting the strings, and
Yes.
that's really the path out of this.
Yeah.
I can't let go of this one other curiosity question. At the very beginning, when we first started talking, you said something about how you could live without anxiety or depression, but then you said, but that idea is controversial.
Hmm.
What did you mean by anxiety or depression, almost questioning the need for those as being controversial? Or is that what you meant?
Yeah, I think we've, in an effort to destigmatize mental
Mm-hmm.
health issues, and frustratingly, to get churches to accept them and to get insurance companies to accept them,
Yeah.
we've increasingly had to discuss them in medicalized language. These
Mm-hmm.
are broken bodies that need to be healed by people who heal broken bodies.
Right.
And the church was saying, you just need to believe harder and you won't be depressed. And then somebody said, hey, it's actually a disease. And the church went, okay, cool. They're welcome here. And then insurance companies said, hey, if they're just being lazy, I ain't helping. And then we said, well, actually, it's a brain disorder. And they go, okay, we'll pay for that. So I think we've cast a narrative that anxiety is like the flu. It's a thing you catch that will be with you, and you can't do anything about it. I think depression is spoken about like cancer. It just shows up in you. You caught it, and it sucks to be you, and you are always going to be depressed. And every insurance form you fill out from here on out, you're going to have to disclose certain jobs you want to get. You're going to have to disclose, I have this thing. And that's what I think is controversial, because I reject that. I think there are seasons when my body wants to get my attention in a major way. So much so in my personal life, I ignored the alarms for so long through accomplishment and achievement and getting a promotion and getting doing another dissertation, writing another article, whatever the thing I was doing to numb. Eventually it says, all right, cool. You're not hearing me. I'm shutting this thing down. I'm shutting the system off, because you're going to get us killed. And I'd rather lay here than get attacked by this tiger. And maybe the tiger will pass us over. Yeah. And it's a last resort, right? And so I just reject the fact that for most of us, now some people have like brain lesions, they've got brain disorders, they've got neurochemistry issues that are going to be with them forever. And what an amazing moment in history that we've got the resources and support and medication to help in those situations. But I think for the vast majority of folks, looking at mental health challenges as your body's way of trying to get your attention, not as some kind of existential curse or some kind of physical curse that's going to bury you forever. One is a language of victimhood and one is language of empowerment. And so let me be the first to say, I have been buried with anxiety, like to where I couldn't move. And I think anxiety and depression are on the same trend line. I have been deeply, deeply depressed. Like, it's hard to move. And I think my body was trying to do the best it could to take care of me, because I was making stupid choices across the board, and I wasn't dealing with abuse and all this other stuff that's going on. And that's what I think is controversial. That's where I get some pushback.
Well, this is a safe space, Dr. John. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that this is actually a very important point, though, for our listeners to be hearing and considering in their own lives, because you're totally right that there has been a medicalization of our emotions in some ways for the purpose of having things taken seriously. It's like we need to be sick to have it taken seriously by the church, or certainly for insurance submissions. And you're also right that there are psychiatric disorders that need treatment. They require and deserve treatment, and then those are real and valid. But like what you're saying, that's one of the biggest reasons why I went into coaching as a profession, which is also somewhat controversial. So, my background of a psychologist, a marriage and family therapist, but then pursued coaching. And I had so many, professional colleagues be like, why are you doing that? And it was because of what you're saying, that like in the therapy world, diagnosis and treatment of mental health conditions. And so if you feel sad or if you're worried about something, that means there's something wrong with you, and we need to make those feelings go away. So that's like the whole premise, versus with a coaching model, I think is in alignment with what you're saying around what is that trying to tell you about your life experience. And maybe the fact that you're feeling these things is indicative of your health rather than psychopathology. And that but it can be very difficult to discern it. And I don't think that there's the language or the ideas almost in the zeitgeist of our culture to help people do that sort of reflection, so that if they feel anxious, there's something wrong with me and I need to fix this, rather than like, what happens if you lean in to that?
Right. When I'm anxious, I want it to be something other than choices I'm making with all of my heart. And let me clarify choices. I don't choose abuse. I don't choose to have a boss that yells at and screams at me. But I do choose to live in a particular city or a particular state. I do choose to have an X lifestyle or not. I do choose to not leave this job because I'm so terrified about what comes next. So these stories are cast inside of us, and I don't want to make light of it. But what I do want to do is to change the narrative a little bit and give people some light at the end of the tunnel. Because if we're all just broken and dysfunctional and we're all this big giant black cloud is sitting over us, what are we doing? We just hanging around for another great Netflix series? Like, really, what are we doing? Like, let's create lives worth living. And for millions of people, that means for the first time looking at your partner across the table and saying, this is what I need, and this is what I'm asking you to be a part of. And millions of people need to leave that abusive boss. That boss needs to have no employees, because nobody deserves to be treated like that, even if it means a pay cut for a season. I just saw a stat before we got on the air together, and it was 80% of people are willing to take a pay cut if it meant better mental health at work. Take it, right?
Yeah.
So when I say there's hard choices to be made, there's hard
Mm-hmm.
choices, and there are trapped people everywhere. It's the word. People stuck on the margins. I get it. Totally get it. But I think there's a whole bunch of us that can say, you know what, I can make big changes. I can make little changes, and they're going to be terrifying, and I'm worth it.
Well, and I'm also glad you're saying out loud that it can be difficult to do. It requires a lot of intention to take stock of your life, your career, your relationship in that way, and an enormous amount of courage to be able to do that. Where would you advise one of our listeners who's listening to this and like, you know what? I think they're right. I need to start thinking about what changes I need to be at least considering, like, right? Like, what is creating the rumination, the heaviness, the attachments? Where do people even start?
I think the first, I give people 3 small steps to take, and I
Mm-hmm.
say small facetiously. They're the worst, the worst, Doc. Like, they're none of this will be fun. The book is based on 7 choices that we get to make or not make, and the first choice is I've got to choose reality, and that's never a fun place. But here's all that means. That means I've got to sit down with a notebook by myself, maybe with a trusted friend, and just write down, here's where I am. I thought my marriage would look like this, and here's what it actually looks like. I didn't mean to gain 100 pounds, and I did. Here is what I weigh. Here is the state of my career. Here is the state of my finances. That's number 1, choose reality. Number 2, I don't know anybody who can do any of this stuff alone. And so you've got to get people to walk with you. Like I said earlier, we have the loneliest generation in human history. And even those that we love and we're connected to, we've outsourced to just long streams of memes from old friends, right? We're just completely disconnected from one another. You got to get a coach or a therapist or a group of 2 or 3 people that will sit down and go through this list with you. And we'll say, no, that's not right. You have not gotten unattractive and dumb. That's not true. Or they might say, hey, you missed one. You're also kind of a jerk, right? And I've got buddies who will do that for me. But I think getting other people to provide new perspective. And then the third choice is I'm going to choose freedom. And what I mean by that, not like an eagle flying across, the thing, and I'm wearing like an American flag underoos. That's not what I mean. When I say choose freedom, it goes back to what you were talking about with the hooks and the tethers and the chains. Who do I owe money to? What is my calendar? How is it running my life? Where am I completely swallowed up in just stuff and clothes and clutter and books and a trashed car? Or where am I overly reliant on perfectionism and everything being exactly perfect, or otherwise I can't function, right? These are places where we just get trapped when it comes to where I have no boundaries. How many grown-ups do you know, Doc, whose in-laws are still deciding what they're going to do for Thanksgiving and Christmas, for God's sake? It's your life. It's your right. So where do we not have boundaries? And so choosing reality, choosing connection, choosing to willingly enter into relationship with other people, rekindle old friendships, start new friendships, call a professional. And the third one is I got to choose freedom. I got to look and be honest about where is somebody else deciding what I'm doing with my own life. And that's a great place to start.
That's so fantastic and very actionable. And I love it because that it is actually starting to listen to the ruminations, listen to the bad feelings that you would prefer not to have, that is actually where this process begins of journaling or talking to a friend or a counselor around what am I thinking about over and over? What am I feeling? And that is how we begin the process of sorting through it. And that once you have that clarity around your reality, as you say, then you can begin to run this past people, get feedback, and think about what would change for you if you were to pursue freedom by releasing some of these attachments or old ways of being once you understand that they're not serving your wellness.
And getting to the
Yeah.
bottom of the story. Just track a
Mm-hmm.
rumination one day. Just track it.
Mm.
So my boss, her name is Suzanne, and let's just pretend that I'm sitting at home and I start thinking about Suzanne, and she said this, and then she did this thing, and then I'm getting so mad. You know what the story's trying to do? It's
Mm.
it's found one person who's got power over me. And I'm a guy, I don't like that. I don't like that one person decides what time I got to be at work and what I need to wear. But that's what I signed up for. I
Mm.
chose this. Like, I walked into this willingly. And so I can either have this conversation in person, like or I can make peace with myself and deal with my problem with authority. I have an authority problem. And sometimes the rumination is about, I'm just going to tell him if he hits me one more time, your body's trying to tell you, get out. You're not safe. Right?
Yeah, that's the fear that we listen
Right.
to. Yeah.
Sometimes your body's telling you, you got an authority issue, man. If you're going to be an adult, you need to get over that. My budget is I'm always having a fight with my budget. And it's always reminding me, you're not 9. You need to learn how to hold off on pleasure all of the time and
Yeah.
save money, right? Those are all, it's just a toggle between this is a real threat and hey, you need to grow up. But it's
Mm-hmm.
just tracking that rumination
Mm-hmm.
all the way to the end, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Those are 3 steps. I think you mentioned that there are actually 7 steps. What are
Yes.
the advanced levels of this work? Where does it go next?
Fourth one is choosing mindfulness. And I know that
Oh,
sounds like
yeah.
an old guy on a cloud
No,
floating
it's
around.
so true. I mean, people wouldn't keep saying that if it wasn't.
Right. In meditation's important, all that. I do that, but most folks that I run into, they're not going to spend a day of their life meditating. So when I say mindfulness, what I'm saying is just creating some space between what what it feels and what you do next. How can you
Mhm.
practice lengthening the gap between stimulus and
Mhm.
response, right?
Yeah.
The fifth one is always choose the hard path. Um, the things that we do now that are hard result in an easier time of it later. If I save more money now, my retirement's going to look a lot different. And my ability to help other people down the road is going to look different. If I exercise now, I'm going to be able to roll around on the floor when I'm 80 with my grandkids, right?
Mhm.
Another one is the psychology of anxiety and belief. And we talked about it a little bit.
Mhm.
If we look back at every single psychological construct from all of them result in self-actualization. If you get all of this stuff, then the self can finally be the shining star at the top of the hill. In my quiet conversations with psychiatrists across the country are very quiet and very, hey, the self is not hold. It can't hold it all.
Mm.
And we have found ourselves uber actualized in our culture, and we're imploding. And so you have to believe in something bigger than yourself. I'm a
Mhm.
Christian guy, so that frames the way I view the world. I've got friends who I love deeply and that are atheists that believe and understand the greater purpose of, death, life, and rebirth, and a part of the earth and the soil and the air. What you have to believe in something bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the self can't hold. It wasn't designed to hold up the universe. And then
Mhm.
there's one more, and it's probably the most important one. Oh, health and healing. To create a non-anxious life, to create a life worth living, you have to deal with your traumas. You got to deal with your past. You got to spend some time with a counselor. You got to spend some time with a pastor. You got to get a group of friends together. You got to deal with
Mhm.
your physical ailments. You got to deal with the fact that dad left, mom got sick, lost a child. You got to deal with those things, or your body's going to be trying to get your attention for the rest of your life until it knows that you're back in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
So that's the 7.
That's fantastic. And thank you too. And I love, even the order that you presented them in, because, you're really talking about that health and healing last. And that has absolutely been my experience in a lot of ways. Like, it's difficult to do really deep, meaningful work around, family of origin of stuff, the shame, if there are aspects of your life just day to day that are not good for you. Like, you really need to be in a safe, solid, foundational place in order to be able to really go into that deep old stuff. And I think that sometimes, people think that they have to get all these big, deep, dark things figured out first, and then they will be able to have a nice life. And it is actually not the way it works a lot of times.
I remember my graduate counseling students, my favorite part was when we would send them to the lab for the first time to start seeing quote unquote real clients when they were just their classmates. And they would always launch into this, like trying to do CBT or trying to do, choice theory or whatever. And I would always stop and say, what if they're just really hungry and they haven't eaten in 4 days? Are they going to be anxious? And they're like, yeah, like, let's start there with, are they safe and are they okay? And what's their, how's their life? Right. So I think, again, taking this conversation full circle, we just dump everything into the mental health bucket.
Right.
And then we say, we need more therapists to go fix them. Man, I think we got to look at the air and the water that we're breathing and drinking. And that's where we're going to find a lot of the solutions to what people are struggling with.
Yeah. Well, and what a hopeful message too, because that is accessible to all of us, and that I think everybody listening to this can be hearing your words and kind of going through those steps that you outline in your book, and experience benefit from that introspection and just from finding even small ways to create freedom in their life that begins just releasing some of those attachments and developing a different kind of relationship with their anxiety that's more being informed by it as opposed to experiencing it like as the enemy that must be eradicated. Yes.
I love it.
This has been such an interesting conversation, as I knew it would be. Thank
you so much for having me again. I appreciate it. Usually I'm a one and done friend. People have me over and they're like, that's enough of that guy. So thank you for having me back. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's always a pleasure. And so tell our listeners if they would like to learn more about your work and your books and your podcast, where would they go?
You can follow me on Instagram. I seem to get myself in trouble there at John Delony. And only after you listen to this podcast, you can find me at the Dr. John Delony Show, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Wonderful. And your book, again, is called Building a Non-Anxious Life.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for having me over.